Well, good afternoon to you folks. Before we kick off, I just wanted to share we had some bad news yesterday. One of our friends and fellow aviators, Lieutenant Marko Novkovic, passed away yesterday. He was out flying with his student in the Croatian Air Force. We can just take a moment to think of him and his family and his friends and the team, the Krila Aluya. I know there's some supporters of the show too. Very sad news indeed. And our thoughts and feelings go out to them and the family in this difficult time. The Wings of Storm, Krila Aluya. Good afternoon to you folks. Today I've got a different kind of an aviation guest. Justin De Reuck is the premier air photographer in South Africa. He's been crafting his skill for nearly 3 decades now, and certainly for the past decade. If you were interested in getting your aircraft photographed from in the air, formation, aerobatic teams, etc., Justin was the go-to man. Today I'm proud to bring this episode to you, sponsored by Optimum Financial Services Group. This episode is proudly brought to you by Optimum. Optimum has the expertise to guide you through investment, tax, retirement, and estate planning, with a solution tailored to your individual needs. Our objective is to provide you with an optimum solution to protect your wealth. Optimum has expertise in medical aid, legal services, asset finance, short-term insurance, as well as specialized services in commercial, marine, aviation, and personal liability. Don't choose the average, choose Optimum. Optimum Financial Services Group is an authorized financial services provider. My name is Alex MacPhail, and this is High Performance Teams. Justin, good afternoon to you. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good afternoon. I'm very well, and yourself?
Good, thank you. I know with the stage 4 releasing some of the restrictions, you're able to get back to work, and I know you've had a busy day, so thank you so much for fitting me in. You guys are getting busy on a project, so tell me about life back out there with the relaxed and back able to do some work.
Well, yeah, the photography is still very much on the back burner. We've been able to do a few little things, but not too much. And then my other company, which does electrical engineering and things like that, we've managed to slowly but surely get the wheels turning on that. But yeah, it's slow. It's not great, but at least there's something out there.
Okay, well, let's talk about aviation, and let's go back to the beginning. So I know you started taking photos at 12. You got an interest in it, but at that point, you as a youth, you've got pocket money, maybe an odd job to set aside to put your money towards your equipment, etc. And it's difficult to really invest well. But that's where the passion started. So tell me about your high school and those years where you really started enjoying photography.
Well, yeah, I mean, photography has been something that's been in my blood since I was a small child, and, just tampering around with my dad's camera and going to the odd Easterplaat air show, which was pretty much all that was around back then. High school, I started my private pilot's license with the hope of one day becoming an airline pilot. But somewhere along the line, after I joined the Air Force, that all sort of fell through. And I went off to go and study electrical engineering. And I think it must have been, about just a few years later that the photography bug just sort of not bit, but I just found myself couldn't putting the camera down, and I had to get back to where my heart really lay.
Okay, great. Now, I remember at a time where you started getting really a bit more prominent. It was the time I was leaving the team. And we had some great times there. You made some great shots. And I want to just show the folk a video of just what it's like to be in your office when you're in the back seat of an aeroplane. So here we go. Oh, that's some great scenes there, Justin. A photo shoot with the Falcon sitting in the back seat of the camera ship. The real point I wanted to highlight there to the folk who don't quite understand the technical challenges of your job, that nice information you put there, it's wonderful to see the G and the speed range. Now with G, you're up to 3-4 Gs at a time. The camera gets quite heavy and you've got to stay controlled, you've got to stay focused, and you're controlling your breathing. Just tell us about, just like in that little video clip, what's the sort of things that you are going through to just get that steady shot?
Yeah, look, there's a lot, and the hard part is, you've got a picture in your head already of the kind of photograph you want. And in that in itself is you're already trying to think about the shot, think ahead of the shot, just so that we can position the aircraft properly, especially in a barrel roll or something like that. At the top of the barrel roll, you want to have the light correct and everything. And just when you've got all that planned out, suddenly you're hit with 4 Gs. The camera suddenly weighs about 12 to 16 kilograms. All the blood's rushing from your head. And now you've got to worry about that. Reflections in the canopy, all that sort of thing, and then still try and get the shot to work. So it's a very taxing environment to work in. It is fun. I do enjoy it. There's no two ways about that.
Sure.
But it's often people don't realize. It looks like a lot of fun, and but it's actually really, really hard work.
Okay, good. Well, let's unpack that a bit. There's a lot that you've mentioned that we've talked about briefly. I just wanted to set the scene to show that the working environment is tricky. And now if we just back up a little bit. So as an air photographer, you told me there you want to create, you've got this shot in your head visualized. But not only that, you've got individual airplane owners or companies that want a shot of their photo of their aircraft. You've got formation aerobatic teams. They've got an idea in their head too. And I suppose they leave a lot of the creativity up to you. However, you need to work with them and figure out the shot beforehand. So tell me about how this conversation begins. Does it start on the Monday morning? Does it start 6 months before? Do you plant a seed and think? Where does that conversation start?
Well, I think it all depends on the client. I think it depends what they want and when they plan on doing it. So often when I do a lot of photography for like the Smoke on Go book, the air-to-air shoots are planned sort of long in advance, but the briefing we literally only have maybe an hour or two prior to wheels up. And then we'll sit with the guys, and if I take an example like shooting for the Flying Lions, so we'll sit with all the guys, Scully and Arnie and Ellis, Sean, sit in the office, and we'll just have a bit of a powwow about what do I want and what do they want. And between those two, we come to some sort of happy medium to work out the logistics of that type of shot. So if I want a stacked echelon sort of step down to the right, that's what I'll say to Scully. Look, that's what I need. That's the kind of shot I'm looking for. That's the background I'm looking for. He would then say, right, guys, this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to set myself up on a reference with the camera ship here. You guys are going to sit like this. He will tell the team who's going to sit in positions 2, 3, and 4. And then we'll create that shot. Once we've got that out the way, we'll say, right, the next shot that I'm looking for would be a left-hand turn, let's say with the echelon out to the right, which would only be because you can't do a right turn with the echelon out to the right. So we do a left-hand turn, and I will then say to them, okay, we're going to step it up at first, and then I will normally position. So that part comes in the shoot, but we would plan the whole shoot. Each sort of photograph that we're looking for will be planned ahead until we actually get up there and then go and shoot it.
Okay, so you've got the initial conversation, you've bashed out ideas, and you've, as a consensus between the creative photographer and the team wanting their poster shot, their book for Smoke on Go, that great publication every year, you've got an idea, and these are the 4 or 5 great shots that's going to come together, and you plan this out. So then on the day of the shoot now, you have a thorough briefing. And what's the sort of communication plan like? Sometimes you have a headset and you're talking directly to the people because you're part of the formation. Sometimes, as you'll see later, that sitting at the back of the C-130, that has to be pre-planned beforehand. So how do you walk through the communication plan to get this briefing the best it can be to get the best out of your shot?
Okay, so most air-to-air shoots, I will have direct comms with the team. Okay, and I would be able to say directly to them, right, once the shot is set up, I can then say to the number one in the formation to come forward, go back, left, right, 3 feet forward, whatever the case is, and then the rest of the team would obviously follow up on him. Once they're all stacked up, I can then look at the formation. If I'm not quite happy with it, I can say number 3 up a little bit, number 4 forward a little bit, until we can get all the tails nicely dressed, or the spinners all nicely dressed, and then from there, plan the shot nicely. If for any reason I cannot communicate with the team, I will then work on a relay system, which I will then speak to my pilot, who will then relay it over to the team. Failing all that, if it's easier, I use hand signals.
Okay, cool.
So basic hand signals for smoke on, smoke off, up, down, come forward, go back, yeah.
Okay, so obviously it's comfortable and you're familiar and people know you as well. So let's back up a little bit. So there's some detail there about the briefing and the planning of the shot. But let's go back to the beginning and when you first getting into it. So you're passionate about photography, you're passionate about flying, and there's an opportunity to marry the two together. Now, how do you go about positioning yourself such that either the person that you want to take photos of will trust you with getting a great shot, and B, the person that you want to be the airplane operator, so you can sit in the back seat with them, that you trust them enough to be able to take the good shot? How did you get that first relationship going?
Yeah, I've often tried to pin a particular point on a timeline where all that came together. And I actually was very fortunate. I learned a lot from the late Frans Deely. Him and I teamed up back in 2010 already. We toured Europe, going to all the air shows, spent many days together in hotels and pub lunches and on airfields. And he taught me a lot. And I will never forget, the one thing he always said to me was, when you are shooting formations, you've got to make 100% sure who those guys in the formation are and who your pilot is. And the number one rule is they've got to be formation trained. And that always stuck with me. And I will never forget, after France's death, I got thrown into the deep end on the Harvard water skiing shot for Scully and the guys. And I remember going into that shoot thinking, I have no clue what I'm about to get myself into here. And yeah, I realized I had to put, we sat in the briefing that morning, and the idea was that I was going to get photographs of the team water skiing, which I thought, no problem. Then in the briefing, Scully informed me, no, we were going to be on the water as well. And suddenly I had 10 million more things to worry about than taking a photograph.
Sure.
And it was that day I realized that, there are certain guys in this industry that I can trust wholeheartedly. The way I always say it is, would I put one of my own children in a plane with that guy? And if I can answer that, I'll fly with him. No problem. So
let me put that picture while we talk about it now. We're going to jump around a bit today, folks, and just enjoy. So there's a shot from the air of the 3 of the Harvards water skiing. I mean, this made a sensation around the world, and since then it's been done again, so a bit more water skiing. But just talk us through the sort of the thought processes and the initial, you said you were kind of thrust in the deep end, but just the sort of energy and enthusiasm from Scully and his team there. It's a wonderful thing, but sure, a bit of high risk. Talk us through the sort of planning and the safety and the risk mitigation and the sort of photo shoot planning specifically.
Okay, there's actually even more to that shot than what you can actually see. Those 3 aircraft there are actually chained together. So that was another completely different photo shoot that we did, where Scully and them had the idea to chain the 3 aircraft together, take off in a formation. We did an air-to-air photo shoot, and then they went water skiing with all 3 aircraft tied together. I had the easy part on that job. I really did. That day, I really, well, I've always known that they're a phenomenal team, but to actually watch that firsthand, gave me a newfound respect for their formation flying. But yeah, that one too, we were at Potchefstroom on the ground. Very, very big briefing based on that, obviously, and working out all the safety aspects more on their side than my side of what we needed to do. For this particular shot, I didn't go on the water.
Okay.
Just from a safety aspect point of view. Having all three aircraft together, we found it probably a little bit wiser to shoot this one more from the top, whereas on the previous water skiing ones, we were on the water with them as well.
Yeah, I see that the chains linking those wingtips. It looks
Correct.
amazing.
Yeah.
I want to put another clip which will highlight some of the details that you go through, and some of the water skiing clips will come into it as well. So let's look at this next clip, and we'll keep the commentary going as we talk through it. I'll just turn the volume down a bit. Let it play a bit, then I'll ask you some specific questions, because another great bit of footage you put together which shows your side of the camera while you're busy in your office. It's wonderful. They're in the L39 now.
Arkansas reaching 20 right, clear takeoff, surface wind to 10 at 20 knots.
On reaching, clear takeoff 20 at Falcon.
When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see a marching band.
A briefing with the Silver Falcons before you get going.
He said, son, when you grow up, would you be the savior of the broken, the beaten and the damned? He said, will you defeat them, your demons and all the non-believers, the plans that they have made? Because one day I'll leave you a phantom to lead you in the summer to join the Black Parade.
Falcon run up.
Just going to turn the volume down just a little bit there so we can have some commentary from you as we go through it. I know you're seeing a little bit of a delayed version of it, Justin, but oh man, when I see these shots, it's just beautiful. You know, you've got some, whoa, what an opportunity to take photos of all these different teams. You know, the different shots of you putting different helmets on different airplanes. I mean, you're in the back seat of all sorts of airplanes. So to talk me through some of these photo shoots where you're strapping into different types of airplanes.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, you know, like I said to you, my entire life I've wanted to fly, and I never ever imagined that a day would come where I would get to fly in all sorts of aircraft with some of the top teams in the world, as I would consider. You know, I mean, I remember as a youngster going to air shows and sort of meeting the Silver Falcons. And I even remember way back watching Scully and their teams as when I was a little kid, never realizing or thinking that one day I would be able to become personal friends of these guys, and not only that, get to shoot these guys in their environment. It's been a massive privilege for me.
And as you talk there's some nice scenes I wanted to just highlight here. I mean, you're in the Harvard now, beautiful. You're on the water, you're facing backwards. This Harvard's on the water. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, that is. I must say that day was a real rude awakening into this industry. But as I said, I was thrown heavily into the deep end that day. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, you've got to realize. I'll never forget when Haley phoned me and said, "Listen, this is the idea. We'd like to do the shoot. Are you able to do it?" The first thought that went through my head was, "There's no ways. I am skilled enough already to cover something like that." But I realized if I didn't do it, somebody else would. So I said to her, "No, I will do it. I'll try my utmost, and we will make this work." And on the day, I will not lie, I was incredibly nervous. It was the first time I'd ever done something like this. And yeah, it worked out really well. And Scully and Ellis and the guys were incredibly happy with the photographs. And that was a huge confidence booster. You know, I realized that, you know, if I can shoot in that scenario and still pull it off, then everything else should be a lot easier. from there on out.
As you've been speaking,
it wasn't always.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a big steep learning curve now. Sometimes you're at the mercy of very adventurous pilots as well, sitting in the back of the L-39. You take a couple of shots, and next thing it's three straight rolls, and you're into a bit of a loop, and it's 4Gs, and wow, I mean, it's just a great ride to begin with. Never mind the great photos you get at the result.
Yeah, it is a great ride, but I've got to be honest. When you're photographing, you're not. Your concentration is elsewhere. You're looking through the lens of the camera. You're watching your subject. You're watching the horizon. You're trying to keep the camera steady because you're normally shooting at a much slower shutter speed as well to get the movement. So there's so much of that's going through my head, watching the reflections in the canopy, that I'm actually not in the back seat enjoying the aerobatics, which actually I still would like to go up one day for an aerobatic sortie without a camera and just enjoy it.
Leave the camera behind, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's some great things that came out there, and there's some more videos we're going to share again. But what came out, and another part of the clip is there's that air-to-air shot with Fly Sapphire and a 737 coming low along the water. So talk us through what it's like to be involved in airliners. I mean, you're seeing airliners in places that airliners aren't normally in those positions. So what are the thoughts that you have to go through when you're planning a shot with a big airliner?
Yeah, it's also, it's once again incredibly, it's different. And it's not just different from shooting anything else. Because at the end of the day, the subject aircraft still has to formate on the camera ship. It's not an easy thing for us to formate on them because obviously I need them in my sight. So they still need to formate on us. And so that was the first time ever in my life that whole scenario had to change, where the L-39 was actually doing the formating on the airliner. So we would actually end up flying all around the aircraft instead of them just formating on us. So that had to my whole line of thinking had to change when we did that. It was also quite an unreal experience to get up in the air and look over your shoulder and see a 737 just a couple of feet away from you. So that was something I will relish. I've done the air-to-air shoot as well with Maiden 747, and that was quite something to have a 747 just outside the door of a Seneca.
Yeah, all right.
But it is very different shooting airliners. They don't. The speeds are very different. The two types of aircraft that are involved are very different. So it is a very different scenario shooting airliners, and it takes, in my opinion, an incredible amount of skill, especially on the airline pilot side, to pull something like that off.
Sure. Okay. Now you've jumped the gun a little bit. I wanted to bring in the Iron Maiden story just now, but let's talk about that in a minute.
Sorry.
So no problem. So Iron Maiden comes to town, and they've got their own painted 747, and they want a photo with Table Mountain in the background. So talk us through that. Like, how do you get involved in this thing? Are you meeting the band? I mean, there's a whole thrill of the aspect of this fancy band. Never mind the fact that it's a massive aeroplane, and they want to catch Table Mountain at just the right time. I mean, that must be quite a complex task.
Yeah, I know. When an aircraft like that comes to town, my first thought was, man, would I love to get air-to-air with something like that? But I didn't even think about it. I had no idea how I would even go about that. And what are the odds of the team saying, oh, yes, we'd like that? And I was sitting at home having supper, and my phone rang. And it was a friend of mine, David Oosthuizen, who is probably South Africa's formidable heavy metal photographer. He shoots all these events. And I see a call from him, and I thought, well, that's a little odd. But immediately my mind started racing, because there'd only be one reason why he'd be phoning me. And he said to me, listen, I'm sitting here with the band, and they would like a shot of their aircraft over Table Mountain. Can you do this?
Oh, wonderful.
And my first thought was, oh, yes, I can. Just give me a couple of hours to put this together, not realizing how much work it was going to be put together.
Sure.
So, I mean, we had to get KMU requests. They had to get permission from the airline. It was actually an incredible amount of paperwork that had to actually go through before the shoot could happen. And of course, we only had a window of something like 36 hours to make all this happen.
Oh.
And literally 2 hours, we were sitting on the ground at Stellenbosch in the camera ship, waiting for the clearance, and still not knowing whether the shoot was going to happen or not. And literally, we got an SMS from the control tower to say everything's cleared, you guys are a go. And we started the engines, and off we went.
Oh, wonderful. And what was the camera ship on this day?
It was a Seneca.
Oh, Seneca with a 747. I don't think there's been too many of those formations before.
No, they haven't.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, that was something different.
Oh, great. Listen, we are jumping around, folks, and it's just one of those conversations that's very exciting. And so there's some comments coming through from people. And one of the questions Rian's asking is, how in the world do you manage to hold that camera weight with all those G-forces? Is there some specific tips or tricks that you do? You just get used to it. Maybe you got the ejection seat handle in front of you sometimes as well. So what do you do for those G-forces with your big heavy camera by then?
Yeah, that's another thing that also is playing in the back of your mind. While you're shuffling around in this back seat, you strap so hard into that ejection seat. You don't really have a lot of freedom of movement to shoot. And while I'm shooting and trying to wiggle myself into a nice position, especially once the G load kicks in, there's another little trigger going off in the back of my head saying, whatever you do, don't knock that ejection seat handle. I can feel it rubbing between my legs. And that's just something else that plays. But the G-forces, that's something you've got to get used to. Nothing can prepare you for that. That camera gets really, really heavy. I just try and hold it up as tight and close to my face as possible. And that's all you can do. At some stage, the whole viewfinder starts to go dark, and you can just sort of make out the aircraft through the viewfinder. Yeah. I remember doing a photo shoot with Pierre Goos and Larry Beamish, and we were flying in T-28 Trojans. And the G-forces were so harsh that the shutter was actually releasing on its own.
Oh, wow.
So I remember as we were going, we were coming out of the loop, and I just remember the weight was so heavy on the camera that the shutter actually just started releasing on its own.
Sure, that's something. I don't know your technical side of the thing, other than how you have to position yourself with your equipment. But that's something you got to consider too. Is that your equipment might operate differently at high altitude or G-forces, etc. It's as I was explaining to some people when I give the talk about the formation aerobatics. The requirement of formation is to stay in position, but then you start adding G, and the sort of finer motor skills required to stay in position is tricky enough. And then you add 4 Gs on, and your hand, which was 5-6 kilograms, becomes 25 kilograms. But now you've got an extra piece of equipment in front of you. It's now adding up to 15 kilograms already on your heavy hand. You use your breathing to control the G, but your breathing to control the shot. It sounds quite complex.
It is, and I'd like to say that I've got it all nailed. The truth is, that you don't, like for instance now with this, I haven't had an aerobatic sortie in months. So my first one back, it's going to be tough, and I'm pretty sure most of the aerobatic pilots are sitting out there now thinking, oh my word, the first day back with those G-forces is going to be something.
Yeah, and you mentioned, just to clarify for those who are not so familiar with all the terms, you mentioned the camera getting a bit dark. So that is actually your vision getting dark as the blood's draining away from your brain. And you need to strain to try and keep that. If you tense all the muscles in your body, you keep the blood up there. But at some point, the blood, it gets away from you, and that's your vision actually starts to make a tunnel vision in front of you. Let's put a picture up now. So you were talking about the Harvards and Echelon, and so there's a staggered picture of the Flying Lions led by Scully Levine, and there's a classic example. So that's not a normal way that people would fly in formation, but you have to create a new shot. So how do you go about expecting something unusual of the team to get something fancy that they're actually looking for?
So, okay, that picture's come up now. Okay, so that particular shot was actually a really great day. There was sort of a low cloud base, so we actually were able to go above the clouds, which makes it a very unique kind of shot because, 90% of even 99% of the air-to-air shoots we do are just, we're looking for a background. in this particular shot, I had this incredible low cloud base. We went above the base, and what happens is the clouds actually act as a huge reflector, and they actually light up the underneath of the aircraft, which you don't often get, because obviously 9 out of 10 times that's all in the shadows.
Sure.
So this was a great opportunity now to actually stagger the aircraft in an echelon stepped up, so that I could shoot underneath the aircraft for once, and actually get the branding and that underneath the aircraft, which is not something I usually do. But this was a nice opportunity to do that, because the aircraft was so lovely lit from underneath now.
It's almost a dream photographer to be able to get extra lighting. You always want to get that light on the shot. I want to just also jump in. There's some more people joining. Thanks. How's it to Jordan and to Toy? How's it, Toby? Jock, welcome. Thank you. Hey, Dad, how's it? Thank you for joining and sharing your comments. He's reminding us that today is the 75th anniversary of the victory in Europe, with the pivotal point being the RAF Battle of Britain by the Few. So there was a nice fly past, I don't know if you saw it earlier, of a 75 flying over in the UK today. But we'll just take a moment to recognize that 75th anniversary as well. And Tony Eddy has joined us. Tony also in the film game, and he says thanks for inviting me. And his parents used to be involved in aerial filming with Scully and hold him in great esteem. Fascinating and spectacular visuals. Okay, so we've got some more pictures, but let's get to another video, because there's some great stuff. I love the sort of behind the scenes detail of your office, Justin. So let's have a look here. This is the Canon workshop video. And there's some more details about setting it all up. There's a couple of repeat things in the beginning, getting airborne. But I love the communication, and you've all the different seats and all the different bits of equipment, and you've got to be comfortable in them. And the sort of hand signals and the communication. There's the door off the aeroplane. I mean, that must be disconcerting. Never mind the ramp open at the back, 15,000 feet. That looks like Virginia Airport flying past. You've got warbirds. Talk us through some of the different kind of shots that you've been involved in.
Yeah, that's the one thing you actually mentioned now, which I have to stress, that this job is everything but comfortable. Every now and again, if you're sitting in the back of an A36 Bonanza, that's comfortable. But even that seat on that PC7, man, after an hour, that thing's like sitting on a concrete block. How you guys do it is beyond me. So it's not a comfortable job, that's for sure. Most of the time, I'm sitting with my bum on the floor, and I've got a yoke sticking in the back of my neck, so I'm sort of leaning forward. I've got no feeling in my bum anymore, and I'm trying to still concentrate on the photo shoot, and the wind is pelting through that door. It's noisy. Sometimes it's really cold, and yeah, it's not a comfortable and fun environment to work in.
Sure, it's one of those things where
it's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, the reward is when you get a great shot, and you've put some through with that ZU Imp. I mean, the Pilatus calendar. It's just some great shots. But also, when a combination between you and the pilots, you know that you need to get a nice shot. You're not flying in a normal position. I mean, there was that shot with a bit of a knife edge. That pilot's also. Oh, there's the Iron Maiden picture coming through. Oh man, so great shots with Bloberg beachfront and Table Mount, and some fun events that you've been involved in so far, Justin. What a privilege.
Yeah, now you talk about the formations, and it was something that only sort of came to realization on a photo shoot, actually with the Flying Lions, was that if they held their normal VIC formation or sort of a diamond formation, it looks great from the ground, but it doesn't look good from the air. Unless I'm directly above them, which it doesn't always happen. So the vantage point that I have, even though the aircraft are in a perfect formation, from where I'm sitting, it doesn't look like that. And I remember doing a photo shoot with the Pit Specials one day, and I couldn't put it together. I had the shot in my head, and I couldn't work out why it wasn't working. And I looked at the photographs, I looked at the positions, and we came down to the ground, and I just said, guys, I don't know what it is, but it's not working. And then I remember between Arnie and Scully and Ellis and myself, we sat there and we said, okay, look, for this to work, this space over here needs to be filled with an aeroplane. So I said, okay, what are the odds of moving airless into that position? And I remember the first thing he said to me, well, that would be completely out of our references. They wouldn't have a proper reference if they moved to that position. But they would give it a try and see how safe it would work out. And we went back out there, and I was able to speak to Ellis and say to him, look, can you move up? Can you move up? Can you move out a little bit this way, this way? And I realized at that point he had no reference.
Yeah.
He was purely going on where I was telling him to be. And it was perfect. I mean, these guys pulled it off. It was amazing. I've never looked back again. And there is one particular shot that is one of my favorite photos of the Harvards. I'm not sure if you're going to pull that up, with the plain white Harvards, where I had all four of them completely out of their references, and it just worked so well. And I've come to realize that shooting air to air in a normal formation reference doesn't work. You've got to be able to have those pilots step out of that comfort zone. Yeah.
And I can tell you from the pilot's perspective, they just want to fly that as tight and locked in this position as possible, and to get completely out of position. And each shoot is different. You know, you've got you've got a different background. You've got Harties, you've got the Voldam, you've got maybe an airport, Virginia. You've got Cape Town, Robben Island, Table Mountain. Every time you want to try to get a different backdrop, you don't want that person in the same position again. So you might find that, okay, so you've got the Harvards out of position, but it's a great shot. But next time that position doesn't work either, and it's a new position once again. So there's a dynamic involved between the team and you to have trust with A, the creativity, but B, that this is going to be safe and it's actually doable. Yeah.
So that's my biggest problem, you know, and I've found it very difficult, especially when I'm shooting the Smoke on Go book every year. And every year I'm shooting a lot of the same teams in a lot of the same colors, the same sponsors, and I'm shooting out of the same airport, usually Rand Airport, to now come up with a fresh idea for a photograph. So it's incredibly, I find it very challenging to basically work in the same environment with the same guys and the same aeroplanes and try and come up with something different.
Yeah.
So it's always nice when we can change locations, because immediately that sets a different background, and immediately you can, it helps a heck of a lot.
Sure. And I suppose you've got that privileged, beautiful background living in Cape Town. I mean, you've got the coastline, you've got Table Mountain, you've got Lions Head, you've got Devil's Peak, Robben Island, the Winelands, the West Coast. You've got so many beautiful spaces. I mean, are people clamoring to get their airplanes down to Cape Town generally? Or how do you find this sort of air photography work sort of pans out?
Yeah, look, a lot of the guys want me to come up to Joburg to shoot, because I suppose that's where the majority of the aviation sector is. And as much as I love going up there to shoot, it's not the most exciting place to photograph. In all honesty, the scenery pretty much looks all the same. If you're not shooting mine dumps, it's something out in the background there.
Hey, be nice. Some of us have a home up, yeah.
Make no mistake, I love Joburg. And also the air is not very clear, whereas if you come down to the Cape, it's very different. The air is a lot clearer. We've got a much wider range of scenery here. So I've often found that guys, when they do find themselves down here with their aircraft, they say, look, now's a good opportunity to do an air-to-air shoot. So, they all want Table Mountain. For some strange reason, whenever there's a Cape Town shoot, Table Mountain always ends up in the brief somehow, which makes it nice. I did quite a big photo shoot now for NAC helicopters, and they were basically redoing their entire profile. So that was really great. We really made use of the Cape there. They wanted shots along the coastline. They wanted shots of Cape Point. They wanted shots of Table Mountain, Lions Head, the Winelands, everything that they could come across. We actually just went out there and we shot in all these different scenarios, which gave them a really good portfolio to play with for probably years to come.
Oh, that's great. Another aspect, now you talk about that. I mean, if you want to get all those different scenes, that's a lot of flying. And that's something I wanted to ask you now. So, Maiden, a 747 doesn't run cheap. 5 PC-7s and a C-130 doesn't run cheap. Putting 5 Harvards in the air doesn't run cheap. So people have to trust you. So how do you build that relationship that someone can say to you, Justin, I want 45 minutes, and we got to make it happen first time.
Yeah, that is, I think, just where I have been incredibly blessed. And, you know, it is, because a lot of people have said to me, how did you get into this game? And I've said, you know, to be honest with you, I couldn't actually pinpoint that one moment in a timeline where that trust could be built up, because it is expensive. And no team, no client is going to put up an inexperienced photographer in an air-to-air shoot, pay all that money, and come back with photographs they can't use or that they're not happy with. So you need to build up a portfolio. And the only way you can build up a portfolio is if you get the chances to go up with these guys. And so it really is, and this is where I really owe a lot of where I am today, you know, to people like Haley and Scully and the Silver Falcons that gave me that chance. Fortunate that I got to work with France Deely, which also just helped me build up something that I think gave me almost an unfair advantage. You know, he taught me stuff that whether or not he shared that with anybody else, I'll never know. But he taught me to think a little bit outside the box and to put emotion into my photographs. And I think once you've done a good couple of shoots and you've managed to bring that point across, other people look at that work and say, okay, we can trust him. Let's put him in a plane. Let's see what he can do, you know.
So, yeah, it takes time. It takes it takes a long time to build up that trust and relationships. You mentioned the Silver Falcon, so I would be remiss to not play this one. It's been wonderful chatting. Let's talk through the Silver Falcon's photo shoot with the C-130. Oh, it is just wonderful. When I saw that doing the rounds on the Twitter and all Instagram and everywhere a couple of years ago, it's just such a wonderful opportunity, and you've got a great shot, that title shot of the show with the Falcons and Tab Mountain from an elevation position. But here, you can see, I mean, you're sitting at thousands of feet in the air, the doors open, you're strapped in with a bit of a monkey chain, and you got to make the best of this very tricky environment. Talk us through that. How did you get this? How do you get a C-130 to be your camera ship and 5 other airplanes in the air?
Well, I don't get to make that happen, unfortunately. That the Silver Falcons put together. So what happens is every now and again, a C-130 comes down to Langebaanweg because it's doing para drops for the recce's. And, you know, doing a ram shoot, as you can see, gives you an incredibly different vantage point from normal air-to-airs. You can finally get a head-on shot, which is not something you can do out of any other aircraft. So to do a ram shoot it's almost like the golden nugget of air-to-air photography. You know, everybody wants to be able to get out onto a ramp. But obviously, like you said, that is an incredibly expensive exercise and an incredibly good use of taxpayers' money. But so what happens is I've often spoken to the team and said, guys, if there's ever an opportunity for us to do a ram shoot, let's make it happen. And the first one happened with Bo Skada, and they were up there. It was 1 December, and the recce's were doing jumps, and Bo called me up and he said, look, there's a C-130 here for a week. Let me see what strings I can pull. Would you be available at a moment's notice? So I said, for that kind of shoot, you can call me at 3 a.m. and I'll be on my way up there to be airborne by first light, you know. Sure. So he managed to get it together, and we did our first ram shoot, which was absolutely incredible. I've never forgotten it. And it was quite a few years later when OG took over the team. And I said to him, listen, we need a fresh photo shoot again. If you can make an air-to-air happen from the back of a C-130, if you know it's going to be there for a couple of days, pull all the strings you need to and let's make it happen. And he did. He called me up one day between him and Sivu and phoned me up and said, look, we've got a C-130 here. We've got clearance to shoot. Can you come up here tomorrow? And I was there like a bear.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah, it's a very rare shoot to be able to do, but wow, what a privilege.
Yeah, I know. And while you're talking through there, all your hand signals going, and you're commanding the team and staggering them out, and it's like you're a conductor of an orchestra.
It is. You know, that was quite a big briefing as well. You know, we had to sit down because I knew I was going to have zero communication with the team and zero communication with the cockpit of the C-130. That had to be planned literally to the T. So it was quite an intense briefing where I basically told them exactly the route that needed to be followed. That we were going to get airborne, go out over the lagoon, do 2 orbits to the left, then 1 to the right. Then we would head down the coast, and I would basically just give the Falcons hand signals as to what formations I wanted them in, and smoke on and smoke off. And I remember saying that to them, guys, the money shot is going to be a very wide turn over the back of Table Mountain, and then coming straight over the mountain, heading due north. That was going to be the money shot of the day. And planning that was going to be absolutely key to where I was going to position the team and at what stage I was going to call smoke on. If I called it too early, the mountain would have been covered in smoke. If I called it too late, we would have missed the shot. So it was an incredibly nerve-wracking shot to do, but it worked.
Justin, once again, you've timed it to a T, because as you're describing the money shot, there it comes up on the screen, and I know you can't even see what we're seeing, and you've timed it perfectly. And I think this is a wonderful place to end it. It's been awesome chatting with you. You've done some incredible things over the years, and I know that you get to celebrate other great acts, which is, it's almost like this relationship that just keeps building. The team looks better, you get better, the whole product gets better, and it's good for aviation. And I know your stuff has been viewed all over the world. So thank you for doing what you're doing, and keep doing it. If people want to reach out to you and get some tips, or just get some advice about this career or passion, is there a way they can reach you and get hold of you for this kind of thing?
Absolutely. I've got a website, aviationphotographer.co.za. My contact details are on there, my Facebook page, I've got Instagram, I've got the whole lot. All the links are up on my website. They are more than welcome to give me a call anytime.
Okay, that's great. Justin, I will put all that information on the show notes. Thank you. I know it's been a busy week for you. Thank you for taking the time today. I appreciate it, and keep up the great work.
You're more than welcome, Alex. And yeah, all the best. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Cheers.
Well, folks, it's been a great chat, wonderful visuals, and nice to get that commentary through all the shots and understanding what goes into making that awesome picture that you see on the calendars and the books and on the web pages. Thank you for signing in today. Please remember to subscribe and share, and pass on the good word of people doing the great things out there in aviation. Until next time, stay safe.
Right.